Hey everybody, I'm Thomas Lyons. Welcome to Astrology Tonight. Astrology Tonight TV is a new show starting here on YouTube, and we'll be going every week. After a while, we'll be going more than every week, and we'll be looking at astrology from the vantage point of the legitimate practices and uses of astrology in the real world. And that can cover everything from celebrities and politicians to corporations to the stock market. There's all kinds of areas that you can focus on in astrology, as well as your personal relationships and your personal life. Many of us grew up knowing a little bit about astrology, but not a lot, and we think astrology maybe is just about our sun sign. I'm a Cancer, I'm a Scorpio, I'm a Leo, and therefore this is what I am. But the only reason we think of astrology in those terms is because that's all we really know. If we know our birthday, we've got a pretty good shot at guessing at what our sun sign is in Western tropical geocentric astrology, which is one of the many kinds of astrology in the world, but it's the kind I'll be focusing on, at least with my work. I'll be having other guests on, astrologers from across the country and around the world, as the weeks go on, and people have different perspectives to offer. But the kind of astrology I do is sometimes called sun sign based astrology, but it really isn't. What it is the only reason it's that is because that's the only thing you personally know about your chart. For instance, me, I'm a Cancer sun. Okay, that means I'm emotional, I'm hypersensitive, even though I'm a man, I'm maternal, I've got a kindness about me, animals love me, children love me, people love me, or are threatened by me. But that's another aspect of my chart. It's not the Cancer sun that they're threatened by. It's my Scorpio moon, perhaps, my intensity, okay, that comes out in the moon, which is the emotional self. Or it's the Aries rising, my rising sign. The rising sign is how you present yourself to the world. It's what you show of who you are. It's how you sort of go after stuff. I have Aries rising. Aries is very masculine, it's very strong, it's very male, it's very forceful, it's very direct, it's to the point. And those are just little pieces of my chart. My sun sign in Cancer is in the 3rd house of the tropical zodiac chart. Geocentric astrology, again, the kind we're basically dealing with here. That means I'm a very verbal person. That means I talk, I speak, I communicate, I write, I read constantly. I'm always looking for new information and new understanding. My midheaven is Capricorn. That's what was at the above the sky at the moment I was born and the place I was born on the earth that particular day. When I was being born out of my mother, right above up in the sky was what's called the midheaven, or the middle of the heavens, the top of the sky. And that represents what you're likely to aspire to, wanting to achieve in your life. Those are some of the very basics of astrology. There's so much to learn, so much to experience, but the show that we're doing here, Astrology Tonight TV, which you can go to astrologytonightTV.com and find our website and get some of the services we're doing. But what we're focusing on is helping you understand the world from the vantage point of astrologers. So I'm going to be looking at, as the weeks go on, politics, religion, what's happening up in the sky in terms of asteroids, like there's some kind of asteroid or comet coming through this week, here the week of February 10th on through. And you know, it's, oh my goodness, you know, it's coming real close, but it's not going to hit us. But even astrologers are learning that even those things, those objects moving through the sky, have meaning for us down here on Earth. So it's a tricky process. There's so much to learn. You can never stop learning. But we're going to give you the world from the vantage point of professional astrologers every week here on Astrology Tonight TV, right here on YouTube. I'm Thomas Lyons. Okay, we're back here on Astrology Tonight TV. I'm Thomas Lyons, your host. We're going to talk politics a little bit now. That's something we're going to do a lot of in the future shows. And I'm going to have a lot of different people on the show with different backgrounds in world politics and national politics for this country, the U.S., where I'm coming from. There's so much to learn and so much to talk about. But basically, governments have astrology charts too. They have their own birth charts, whether that government be your local town or your county or your city or your state, your nation. Each one of them has its own beginning, just like a person is born, or a marriage begins, or a corporation is founded, or something happens. That moment in space and time is a unique moment known as the birth of whatever that thing is, okay? And depending on what moment in space and time something happens, it shows you a whole sense of the essence of what that thing, person, or what have you is going to be about, what its future is going to be about. It's fascinating stuff. As far as I'm concerned, the fact that astrology works is it's kind of the proof of the existence of God. I mean, it's the proof of the existence of a higher power, that there's real order and structure and meaning to life. There's an old saying in astrology, as above, so below, that what's happening up there in the sky with the planets and the stars and all the rest of it are related directly and specifically related to what's going on down here on Earth. Now, when I first met my wife, Rhonda, obviously before she became my wife, back in the very end of 2001, just after the 9/11 attacks in this country, my wife was saying to me, you know, everyone's worried about the winter solstice in December of 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar cycle, and everyone's all stressed out about that. And this was, she was saying that way back at the end of 2001. She was saying, but you know what? That's not what they should be worried about. What they should be worried about is 2008 and 2009, because that's when Pluto, in its almost 250-year cycle, enters Capricorn, which represents foundations, corporations, banking, countries, nations, leaders. She said in 2008 and 2009, that's when the world economy is going to collapse. That's when the banks are going to start falling apart. The mortgage things are going to start crashing down. Governments are going to start being toppled. Leaders are going to change. And she was dead on accurate. She kept saying that, and everyone's like, oh, that sounds interesting. What about the Mayan calendar? But the reality is what happened in 2008 and 2009, the crash of our world economy was much more significant than what happened for us in the Mayan calendar, end of cycle, beginning of a new one, at least as far as I can see, or anybody else can see in the astrological communities. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on with these larger and smaller cycles. Now, the planet Pluto is on its way to having what's known as a Pluto return for the chart of the United States of America. This is still a few years away, but not very far away. I think it's around 2022, 2023, thereabouts, about 9-10 years from now, when everything really hits the fan once and for all for this country. We're basically hitting a cycle in which we come back around to where Pluto was about 250 years or so ago. And Pluto represents death and rebirth, death and transformation. That's the time when all the deep, dark little secrets have to be let out and looked at for what they really are, so they can be cleansed and purified from us. And what we're really looking at about 9 years from now, it's a process that we're already in the midst of to a certain degree, and we'll go through after that point. But about 9-10 years from now, we're really looking at the death and the rebirth of the United States from the vantage point of a Pluto return. We'll talk a lot more about that in coming shows as time goes on, but that's just a reminder that this stuff is fascinating. The Arab Spring that happened started a couple years back, so-called, when all these revolutions started happening in the Arab countries. What we saw was Uranus, which has about an 84-year cycle, ending its time passing through Pisces and beginning a radical new transformation, a radical new cycle that goes, beginning the next 84-year cycle with Uranus moving into Aries. Now, Uranus at the very end of Pisces, typically when a major planet is ending its transition through a particular sign, things come to head and a whole transition or transformation begins to happen at that time. And so Uranus, the planet of revolutions and radical new ideas and the general populace, the people and all the different groups of people coming together and working together across party lines and religious lines and what have you, with Uranus going through the end of Pisces, Pisces being the masses of people and new visions and new ideas, and entering into Aries, Uranus entering Aries, which has to do with war and violence and taking charge and just taking physical action. What we saw at the end of 2010 into early 2011 was Uranus finishing 84 years, going around the zodiac, finishing up in Pisces and beginning in Aries, and we saw the whole revolution coming in the Middle East and the Arab countries and other places in the world as well. But astrologers who pay attention to political astrology saw that coming a long time ahead of time and knew that those sorts of things would be on the way at that time. We weren't necessarily sure exactly where in the world unless you look at the charts of different nations, but these significators are very, very interesting. These significators are very, very interesting now. About a week ago, Kim Jong-un, who is the current dictator of the country of North Korea, the son of Kim Jong-il and the grandson of Kim Il-sung, who was the first modern dictator of this new nation of North Korea, has been making a lot of noise. He's been threatening the U.S. with all kinds of weapons and such, and making a big fuss over that. But it got me to wondering, how did this all come about, that these two nations separated? Because Korea is one of the oldest peoples, one of the oldest identifiable nations or cultures on the earth. They are thousands of years old as a recognizable culture. The U.S. is an infant by comparison. And so I wondered, how did we get there that these two countries split apart? Well, what happened was at the end of World War II in 1945, the United States, working with the Soviet Union, who had been their partners against the Nazi Germany threat for Europe and the world. I've got a couple of kitties talking to me here on the side. They decided to petition the country into a north and southern part of Korea. They created North and South Korea at that time, with the Soviets having a new communist government they were helping to build in North Korea, and the new South Koreans being supported by the Americans and democracy. And there was a period of a few years where there was some flux there, and I wondered, how is it if these two nations split apart, or became two nations at the same time, as ancient nations split apart at the same moment, how is it that their nations were so different, these modern nations of North and South Korea? So I looked it up and I found out that their splitting up kind of happened a little bit differently. What happened is when they established themselves officially as separate nations, as separate governments, that those were two separate moments, two separate astrology charts. They happened about 26 days apart in the year of 1948. I've got to get rid of something here. And in 1948, South Korea, on the 15th of August, created the new official nation of South Korea. And about 26 days later, North Korea, on the 10th of September 1948, created its official nation, or declared itself an official nation. Now, I don't have a time of day for when they officially became separate individual nations, but they are 26 days apart, which is fascinating because it makes for very, very different charts. Very, very different nations and very different personalities, as shown by the national charts. South Korea was born, interestingly enough, with the planet Uranus, an 84-year cycle, at the very last degree of Gemini. Now again, as I said a little earlier, when a planet is the very last degree of something, there's a culmination and a completion of something, often a major shift or transformation of some kind happens just as you're about to move into the next sign. Well, Uranus, the planet of revolutions and radical things happen in the very last degree of Gemini. Gemini is the twins. Gemini is the two, the one and the other, the two sides of the same self, North and South Korea, which is interesting to me. And yet 26 days later, when North Korea declared itself a separate nation, Uranus had already moved into Cancer, into a different sign. And so the radicalness that happens in North Korea has more to do with the radicalness or instability. Uranus is also instability, the unstable side of the home front, because Cancer in a nation's chart represents the home front, the people and the home front and their family lives. And so the radicalness that comes into North Korea in their chart 26 days after South Korea's chart is a radicalness or instability on the home front, on people's personal lives and home lives. South Korea has a very powerful chart. It's a Sun in Leo nation. It's very proud. It's very sure of itself. It's very adventurous. It wants to go out there and create new things. And its Sun was conjunct Pluto, which is power and money and banking, and also conjunct Saturn, which is industry and government and corporations and hard work and building towards the future and achieving great things. And it's also, the Sun is also conjunct Mercury. All of this is in Leo. And the Mercury is the mind and the intellect and creative ideas and new possibilities. And so you have this nation that is filled with power and will and discipline and creativity and willing to expand and grow. And they have grown into this extraordinarily successful nation, one of the most successful nations on the earth right now. And yet their brother, if you will, in North Korea, established as a separate nation only 26 days later, has its Sun in Virgo, not Leo. Its Sun in Virgo. Now Virgo on the high side is hard work, it's discipline, it is also about limitation, can be about tough times, shouldering burdens, and the life force of the people. It has to do with growing of food and agrarian culture, and whereas South Korea is full of energy and vitality and creativity, North Korea is very much a sort of a lower side of Virgo nation. It's about rules and hardship and constrictions and discipline and harsh judgments by the people and harsh judgments by the government. It's a very limiting kind of society. South Korea's Mars. Going back to South Korea, its Mars is in Libra, conjunct Neptune. So when South Korea became a separate nation, even though they had a very brief war with the North because the North invaded them and had a 3-year war called the Korean War, South Korea is not a warring nation. That's not what they want. Their Mars, their military energy is in Libra, which is exactly the opposite of war. It's looking for balance, it's looking for diplomacy, it's looking for harmony, and its Mars is conjunct Neptune, which means it's visionary, it's a dream, it dreams of peace, it dreams of harmony, it dreams of balance. But only 26 days later, North Korea's Mars, the energy of war and will and desire, is in Scorpio. It's a very, very warring kind of energy. It's all about wanting to get even. It's about wanting to take what it can for itself. It's about scheming and backroom deals and secrecy. But it's a very, very warring culture. So you see, even the moments that these two nations split in half after thousands of years of being one nation, when that happened, we had two very different birth charts for those nations and two very different futures that the two have moved into since then. I did take a quick look at the chart for Kim Jong-un. I was going to talk about that and see what it looked like for what he was going to be doing for the nation. But then I discovered with a little bit of research that the North Korean government has given an official birth day for this particular young man as January 8th, 1984, but there's a lot of rumors that he was actually born sometime in 1983 and that they had their own reasons, perhaps Chinese astrology, for choosing and making him January 8th, 1984 instead of sometime back in 1983. So I'm going to leave him alone for now. But what I can guess on as far as Kim Jong-un's immediate choices for his nation is there are rumors that he's been heard singing the Taylor Swift song, "We Are Never, Ever, Ever getting back together. So as far as the North and South getting back together again, if that song has any meaning, it doesn't look good right away. Thomas Lyons, Astrology Tonight TV for politics. It's getting late where I'm recording these sessions, so I'm getting sillier as I go along. AstrologyTonightTV.com. You can go visit us there. You can see us on our new Facebook page. And right here every week on YouTube.
It's your birthday and you're still stupid. You're just another day closer to the grave.
Death at your door, breathing's a chore, Maylocks is love.
Okay, right now we're going to take a look at celebrity birthdays this week. This week, everyone born this week who's celebrating a birthday this week has their sun in Aquarius. Now, Aquarians are classically an unusual group of people. They tend to march to a different drummer's beat, if you will. There's something radically different about a lot of Aquarians. There's often a quirkiness that we find in those with their sun in Aquarius or their moon in Aquarius. My mother had her moon in Aquarius. Aquarian risings are often sort of unusual in terms of their presentation, how you see them. Sometimes they're hard to connect to. That's one of the things that a lot of people think about Aquarians. They're hard to connect to emotionally, but the thing is Aquarians can be just as emotional as anybody else, although they are they're an air sign, they're a mental sign. They're all about thoughts and ideas and fascinating concepts and connecting to lots of different types of people. But Aquarians can be deeply emotional, except that often their emotionality is a little different than perhaps yours or mine. Moving on to other people born this week, there's a lot of quirky Aquarians. Aquarians often tend to be quirky regardless of all the other aspects in their life. Christina Ricci has a birthday this week, February 12th. Classically known since she was a child for some of the oddest, quirkiest roles out there. She's kind of like Johnny Depp takes quirky roles. Christina Ricci often goes for the very unusual and quirky characters. Jerry Springer. A former mayor turned TV host, and as far as Aquarians are concerned, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, and Uranus is radical stuff, revolutionary things. The planet Uranus itself was discovered about the time of the American and French revolutions, so and it's associated with new technology. In fact, it was new technology, better telescopes, that allowed for the discovery of the planet Uranus in the first place. So Uranian-ruled characters like Aquarians are often very interesting and often break the rules and do things differently than the rest of us. And Jerry Springer, love him or hate him, his TV show years ago, The Jerry Springer Show, created really a whole new type of American television pseudo-reality show in this country, where people come on the show and they get outrageous, they scream, they yell, they attack each other, they throw chairs, they do all kinds of crazy wild things. And that radically new type of TV show, again, love it or hate it, really helped open the door for a lot of unusual, quirky types of shows that probably wouldn't have gotten aired on TV before that show sort of broke a lot of barriers. So he's an interesting Aquarian for that reason. Peter Gabriel was born on the 13th also. Jerry was born on the 13th, so his birthday's this week. Peter Gabriel, one of the founding members of the band Genesis, who then went off on his own and did some of the most unusual rock music, brilliant stuff, but very, very different than a lot of the rockers out there, and seems like a really cool guy, very interesting guy. Also this week, born February 12th, Arsenio Hall is having a birthday this week. I think Arsenio is turning 57. He was born 1956 in Cleveland, Ohio. And he's an interesting Aquarian as well, because everyone's uniquely who they are, regardless of just the sun sign or just the this or just the that. I'm searching for his chart here as I speak. Ah, there you go, Arsenio. Arsenio is a much more deeply connected to those he loves types in a very, very real demonstrative way, more so than what you think of as your average Aquarian sun, because his sun and his moon and his Mercury and his Chiron are all in his second house, which equates to the second sign, Taurus. So there's a whole Taurian love thing that's part of him. There's a warmth that a lot of Aquarians don't really necessarily show outwardly. That's very strong because the sun and his moon, his life force and his emotional self express itself in the field of the second house in his chart. And his Venus, and the second house is classically ruled by Venus, as is the second sign, Taurus. His Venus in Aries, the very beginning of Aries, is very close to what's called a cardinal point on his chart, his nadir. So it shows that part of his emotional self is he loves very strongly and very freely. When he cares for you, he really loves you, he really cares for you. He's also a Sagittarius rising in his Mars in Sagittarius, and so he's a real freedom guy. He's a sports guy. He's a guy who likes to get out there and just do stuff. He speaks his mind. He's very honest. It's a very honest and interesting guy. He's made some very unusual Aquarian type quirky decisions, people would think, from the business world, by walking away from a successful television show, the famous Arsenio Hall show, coming back, by the way, this fall, I think September 9th. He's launching a new Arsenio Hall show, and I wish him the very best because he's wonderful. But he took a lot of time off and turned down a lot of roles so that he could father his son, who is now, I think, about 14 years old. These are some of the Aquarians out there. If you're an Aquarian this month, this week, happy birthday. And every week we're going to look at some of the different folks who have a birthday that week, and what their particular differences are from one person born the same day to another by looking at other aspects of their charts. Happy birthday, everybody.
You're much older, but no wiser. The pit without the plum. It's your birthday, and hey, let's face it, you're dumb.
Dumb, yes you are dumb, incredibly dumb. Dumb, 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 dumb.
Happy birthday!
Okay, on Sunday, February 10th, we're coming off of a new moon in Aquarius. And Aquarius is an air sign, it's a mental sign, it's a fixed, meaning somewhat stubborn or stable sign. It can be a time of detached emotions. It can be a great time for dealing with others in your community and your personal circles. It can be a time for great inspiration and new ideas and breaking the rules, doing something different with your time. The moon is in Aquarius this 10th of February, Sunday, until about 1:21 p.m. California time in the afternoon. And then we shift into Pisces. And Pisces is a water sign. It's an emotional time. The moon being an emotional sign, we're more mutable, more flexible, more changeable. We tend to go into sort of deep emotions and dreaminess, sometimes a bit of self-doubt or self-pity. That can be a tough part of that process. So we need to fill our time with things that make us relax, good movies, music, lovemaking, fantasy, catching up on sleep, meditation. All these things are good things to do. We're basically resting up for about 2.5 days during the process of moon in Pisces and getting ready for a whole new phase of creation and action in the world when we move into the sign of Aries. Now the moon moves into Aries about 5:53 p.m. on Tuesday the 12th, and we'll be there again for about 2.5 days from that point. Moon in Aries. Aries is a fire sign. It's a cardinal, which means a leadership sign. It's time emotionally we feel suddenly full of energy and physical strength and vitality, and it's a time to take action in our lives. It's a good time to do sports. It's a good time for sex. It's a good time for starting new projects we've been needing to get around to doing. It's a time to just do the things that we need to do with our physical energy and with our ideas and inspiration, the things that just we feel like, yeah, I got to do this, things that make us feel good about ourselves. That energy stays with us until about the 15th, early morning hours, being Friday morning. So when we go to sleep Thursday night, the 14th, the moon's still in Aries, but about 2:09 a.m. California time on the 15th, being Friday, before we wake up, the moon shifts into more sensual and physical Taurus. And emotionally, this day and the next couple of days, we're going to start feeling perhaps a little lazier, a little more sensual. It's a good time for good food and good friends and good wine, and for treating yourselves. It's a time for also doing stuff to make things look nicer and more organized. So it's a good time for cleaning up your house and making things pretty and nice for yourself and for your family and for your friends. And finally, on the 17th, Sunday, about 1:51 p.m., we move into Gemini in Gemini moon here in California. And again, you adjust your own clocks to figure out what time these shifts happen for you. But 1:51 p.m. here in California on Sunday the 17th, we move into Gemini. And once again in Gemini is an air sign. It's a mutable, changeable sign. It's a good time for doing fun things. It's a good time for reading and working with contracts and detail stuff, as long as you don't get too bogged down. It's a good time for talking and chatting and catching up with people, and it can be a good sign for signing contracts and getting the details right. Remember, and towards the end of next week, around the 23rd or so of February, Mercury, which has to do with lots of things that are technical, turns retrograde, but we'll talk about that next Sunday. This is Thomas Lyons for Astrology Tonight TV at astrologytonighttv.com. And again, Christina Adolfsson's wonderful illustrations for this section. Her work can be found at nicelifecoaching.com on the internet. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to Astrology Tonight TV, astrologytonighttv.com. I'm Thomas Lyons. We're going to wrap up this week with a wonderful little spiritually inspiring piece by a guy named Michael Erlewine. Michael Erlewine is actually a legend and I don't kid you, a legend in astrological circles. Michael has been practicing astrology professionally for more than 40 years. He comes from the Big Rapids, Michigan area, and Michael is the guy who created modern computer programs for astrology, so we can all do this stuff by pressing a few buttons on our computers. Michael's company, original company, is actually the second oldest surviving software company on the internet. The only people that beat him to the punch were the people at Microsoft. So Michael has a new thing on YouTube himself called Spirit Grooves. Michael is a professional musician and computer tech and programmer and astrologer of many different types of astrology. Very cool guy. But we decided he'd do a little section he calls his Andy Rooney section, which refers to the decades of a show called 60 Minutes on CBS television, in which commentator Andy Rooney would wrap up each of those news shows with his own sort of commentary about life. And Michael's commentary tend to be rather spiritually oriented, and there's some reference to the solar flares that are happening in the world right now. Spirit Grooves, please check him out on YouTube, Michael Erlewine. Enjoy, and thank you. I'll see you with new stuff next week, and please check in during the course of this week and recommend it to your friends. Astrology Tonight TV at astrologytonighttv.com if you want to check out our astrological services available to you. I'm Thomas Lyons. We'll see you later. Bye.
I've been asked what are the internal signs that we should look for in these solar flares, and I can only share my own experiences with these great events. There's nothing quite like a strong solar event to shuffle my options and to offer me at least the opportunity for a new deal. The deep imprinting of a solar flux event has the ability to wipe out my short-term memory, at least as regards my current plans or direction, and tends to leave me stranded in myself, standing there vacantly looking around for which way to go once again. Luckily, this only lasts for a day or so, and then I pick up not where I left off, but on some more or less obvious line or direction. And if that fails to happen, I start sorting myself down to basics. For example, one common response at these times involves me cleaning out my office, or one of the areas where I have stacked and stored too much stuff. It's mindless work, but just what I need to be doing at these times of inner reorganization and change. No, I can't say I have a clearly defined path or direction, but I've learned not to worry about that, but just to be patient and let the inner forces do their work. It all sorts itself out soon enough, and from the chaos, some kind of new, at least for me, view or take on things gradually emerges. And the new view always seems to contain some sort of a path, and once on any old sort of path, like a walk in the woods, I'm content to go on with my life. Things fall into line. Like a school of fish, all the signs eventually line up again and appear to be going in the same direction. I find this comforting. So what is this? This, for me, is change. Not the superficial change of an outward event or sign, but deeper, inner change that actually rearranges the basic rules of my life from the bottom up. And yes, often I can remember having been here before, seen life as I now see it, but I can't quite remember just where or when. So I tend to go with the flow, once a flow or direction actually appears. And pretty soon I'm setting up shop all over again, making sense out of chaos, rebuilding my world, probably in my own image. My old Humpty Dumpty self puts itself back together again and life goes on. This certainly is a dramatic image of samsara, what the Buddhists call cyclic existence. I guess the main takeaway from all of this solar activity is to have patience as far as looking for direction or ascertaining what direction you are on or should be taking. Solar flares are a good time to practice taking things a day at a time, rather than guessing where things are at or where things should be. Things are not at where they will be, so I tell myself to just relax in the suspended time. The other shoe has not fallen yet. And when there is this much solar disturbance, like during a solar flare, part of the creativity of it all depends on our taking these changes to the path, as the Buddhists say.